and I've labeled it the Sahaba in the Gospel parables. Of course, we know the Quran doesn't only claim the Prophet, peace be upon him, is in the Bible. It also claims the Sahaba were foretold. That's Surah 48, Ayah 29, I believe. So, Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew is really what I'm going to focus on here, and it sets the scene. Matthew sets the scene in Matthew chapter 3. John the Baptist says to the Jews that they're going to be punished. He says, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from this coming wrath? Therefore bear fruit worthy of repentance." So he's telling them, repent. Okay. "And do not presume to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our ancestors, for I tell you, God is able from these stones to raise up children to Abraham. Even now the axe is lying at the root of the tree. Therefore every tree that does not bear good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire." So this is Matthew setting the scene. And what we have here is John the Baptist threatening the Israelites and saying that you better repent, because whoever doesn't repent is going to be punished. And he's saying, don't think that you're safe just because you're the children of Abraham, because God can raise up children from Abraham from these rocks. So the threat here is, if you don't repent, you're going to be punished. And he threatens them by saying they're going to be replaced by other children from Abraham. Don't think you're just children of Abraham, you're fine. God can raise up other children from Abraham and replace you. Now, John the Baptist here isn't saying this is definitely going to happen, but it's a threat. But we'll see that Jesus later confirms this threat. Okay, so we get this in a number of texts. For example, Matthew chapter 8, a Gentile comes to Jesus and he shows a lot of faith in Jesus. And Jesus replies by saying, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So here, Jesus saying that, he's amazed at this Gentile's faith, and he responds by basically saying that in the feast in heaven, so basically in heaven, we even have a hadith of what's the first, I think it's like breakfast in Jannah, and it's like fish. So basically, there's at least one feast in heaven, in Jannah, and Jesus is saying, peace be upon him, that a lot of Gentiles are going to be at that feast, but you, meaning the Jews, are going to be thrown out, and you're going to be in hell. So now Jesus is here explicitly foretelling this. What John the Baptist said was a threat. He was threatening them. He's saying this might happen. Okay, God might replace you with children from Abraham. And then Jesus explicitly confirms it and says, yeah, you're going to be thrown out, meaning you're going to be in hell, whereas a lot of Gentiles are going to be in heaven. So the idea then seems to be a lot of the Jews are going to be punished, but a lot of Gentiles are going to come into the knowledge of God. And of course, at the time of Jesus, you didn't have Gentiles who were...
So okay, let me just understand this. So what's being described here is that Gentiles will essentially be brought into quote unquote the kingdom of God, or brought into, basically, they'll be brought
heaven.
Yes, exactly. Now, if I'm a Christian, I'm going to ask, why on earth would this be the Muslims? Why can't this just be, I don't know, the people from Europe, the people from Rome, for example? Why does this have? Why the Muslims in particular?
We're going to get to that with the very next text and some other texts. Which basically say the same thing. But now, if the Gentiles are in Jannah, then that obviously implies that the message reached them and they accepted God, and as a result, they're being rewarded in heaven. Right. So there is this implication that there will be Gentiles who will be in heaven, whereas a lot of the Jews are going to be in hell. Okay. It's not all the Jews, maybe, but just a bunch of them are going to be in hell. Right. That's what Jesus is saying. Okay. So he's confirming John the Baptist's threat. Okay, we don't need to read this commentary because it's pretty obvious. Now, Matthew 22, Jesus foretells the same thing, okay, and this time in a parable. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves or his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went to his fields, and others to the business. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged he sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Okay,
Okay.
so up till now, what's going on is Jesus saying that God, he prepared this wedding banquet, and then he told his servants to go out and invite the people to this wedding. Now, who are these? So the servants here are the prophets, and they go to the Israelites to invite them to
Okay.
come to the banquet that God has prepared, meaning accept the revelation, believe in it, and so you'll be in heaven. Sorry, you'll be in heaven. Basically, accept the invitation to heaven. But what do the Israelites do? They reject the prophets. It says
Right.
the
They killed. They unalived God's prophets, right?
yeah, they seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them.
Yeah.
So now, what's God going to do? Verse 7, the king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Now, this is referring to 70 CE. In the year 70 CE, the Romans came and destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. And
Right.
Jesus foretells this event of the temple destroyed many places. So it's very obvious that Jesus is foretelling this, that all these prophets have come to the Israelites, including now John the Baptist and Jesus and their followers, like the disciples, etc., are going to the Israelites, asking them to believe and stuff. But the Israelites, they don't want to have any of it. So now God's punishment is going to come, and he's going to destroy the temple in 70 CE.
Okay.
Then he said to his servants, verse 8, the wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find. So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. So now God says to...
Yeah. Oh, okay. So just because I want to be sure people are staying up to date with this. So what we see is Jesus is speaking. He uses the word servants, but servants here are prophets, right? The prophets of God, inviting to the people, which I guess makes sense. The prophets of God invite. They do da'wah, right? They invite people to the way of Allah Azza wa Jalla, to the way of God Almighty. But then we all know the Quran even mentions this, and of course, Christians will acknowledge this as well. God's the Israelites killed God's prophets. They unaligned God's prophets, disbelieved in them, and so on and so forth. Broke their covenant with God, basically. And so so now the destruction of the temple, and was it 70 AD?
Yeah. So God says, so Jesus says they're going to be punished in 70 AD as a result.
Which hasn't happened yet. Which hasn't happened yet.
Which happened in the year 70. Yeah,
but
it hadn't happened at the time of Jesus.
Yes. Yeah. Of course, it's 70 AD. It's been a minute since then. But but at the time Christ supposedly said this, obviously, it's not 70 AD yet, right? So okay. So now Christ, prophesizing at the destruction of the temple. Okay.
Yep.
Because of the breaking.
Now it's going to happen. Yeah. Okay. Now it's going to happen is then he said to his servants. So now these are actually other servants, because we know the previous servants were killed. So now he says to his servants, the wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited didn't deserve to come. So heaven is ready, Jannah has been prepared, but the Jews who were invited didn't deserve to come.
Broke God's covenant, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find. So now they're being told not just to go to the Jews, but go to everyone. Okay.
Okay.
Go to the street corners and invite anyone you find. Okay. So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. So basically, they're trying to find, they're going everywhere and inviting everyone. So now it's not just to the Jews. Now you have servants who are going out to everyone, the Jews and the Gentiles, and they're inviting all of them to believe in God and to worship him alone. Okay.
Right.
Now, again, these are different servants because we know the previous servants are described as being killed, etc. And these servants are not coming after the destruction of the temple. So again, the timeline here is the Israelites reject their prophets, including Jesus and John the Baptist, and you can say even the disciples are callers to God. So as a result, God is going to destroy the temple by the Romans. And after that, he's going to send other servants to go to, this time, the Gentiles. And they're going to go, these servants are going to go and they're going to invite everyone to God, the bad as well as the good. And then it later explains as the bad are essentially munafiqun. And they'll be thrown out into hell. It goes on to say, but when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who's not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, how did you get in here without wedding clothes, friend? The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So just like the Muslim Ummah.
What does that mean? So what does that mean exactly?
So basically,
these are parables, obviously,
Yeah.
right? So this does take some,
yeah.
metaphors.
So basically, what he's saying is now the servants go out and they invite to the banquet everyone, the bad as well as the good. Okay. So now in the parable, when the king comes in to see the guests, he sees one person who represents the bad people, and these are people who are don't have the wedding garments on. So basically, these are people who don't deserve to be at the wedding. At the banquet. Why? Because these are munafiqun. These are people that look like they're in it, but actually they're hypocrites. So they're going to be thrown in hell.
Okay, interesting. And
And
just to be clear, so how do I say this? So what this is referring to when this banquet is the kingdom of God, right? This banquet,
Jannah,
right? And these people he's inviting are, well, at first it was the Jewish people only, but
Yeah.
now he said when he's talking about some deserve to come and some don't, is that talking about only the people amongst the Jewish people, or is that including the Jews and Gentiles?
Let's see. In the beginning, he says those I invited didn't deserve to come. That's talking about the Jews.
Right.
Later on, when he throws one of them out, that's supposed to represent the munafiqun, basically, who are going to be in hell
amongst the Jewish people.
It's the munafiqun for everyone. Because
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll quote scholars to make it clear that this is what's going on.
Okay.
But essentially, now, how does this fit the Islamic understanding? Yeah. So the Israelite prophets came, including Jesus and John the Baptist, and even their followers, and they all invited the Jews, but the Jews used to kill their prophets, reject their prophets. As a punishment, God destroyed the temple in the year 70 CE, and there were no more prophets. We know that Jesus was the final prophet before the prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And then other prophets, or another prophet and other callers to God, basically, the prophet, peace be upon him, and the Sahaba, they were now sent out to invite the Gentiles. So the previous prophets were only for the Israelites. Now God is going to send this Gentile prophet and his followers who now go to the Gentiles and invite them to Jannah.
So what part of this? So if I ask, what part of this makes it clear that it's going to? Because look, Christians will say, no, Christ was the last prophet. He was the last. He was it. What if a Christian was to come and say, no, this isn't talking about a future prophet. This isn't like a, how do I say it? This isn't like a prophecy of a. Because look, Christians will say, yes, we believe that the message wasn't only for the Jewish people. They believe the gospel. When Jesus came, he didn't just come for. I mean, look, as Muslims, we believe Jesus was only for the Jewish people. But Christians will say no. But Christians don't have to have a problem with. You good, man?
Yeah. So
the Christians don't have a problem with Gentiles being brought into God's fold, right?
Yeah,
into the fold of God.
Now, note.
What is it about
let
this?
Me address that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So note what's going on in the parable is the temple is going to be destroyed in the year 70 CE, right?
Right.
And then the mission to the Gentiles, right?
Uh-huh. Oh, right.
Now, when is Paul writing?
30 in the 30s, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, scholars usually say like late 40s, 50s, etc. And he probably dies before the destruction of the temple. The book of Acts, which was supposed to include a mission to the Gentiles, that's set before the destruction of the temple. You can argue whether it was written before or after, but the point is it's set before the destruction of the temple. So the point is the Christian mission to the Gentiles, which they innovated because of Paul, this doesn't actually fit Jesus' wording because it's before the destruction of the temple. So the narrative doesn't fit. That's the first thing. It doesn't actually fit the parable. Okay. So by Paul starting the mission to the Gentiles before the destruction of the temple, he actually exposed himself as having the false mission to the Gentiles. And secondly, we also know that the version of Christianity that spread to them was this false version of Christianity with, at the time of Paul, like the whole dying for the sin stuff. But then later on, we know that when Christianity became popular in the Roman Empire, it was this Trinity version. None of it.
So just to essentially make this clear, just for myself, by the way. So the reason why this has to be someone after Jesus and after the gospel, quote unquote, is because Jesus is speaking of things to take place after the destruction of the temple. Obviously, the message of, obviously the writing of the New Testament and the stories of the New Testament, and basically the setting of the New Testament, the setting of all the stories of the New Testament predate the not the crucifixion.
Yeah.
Predate
Whereas
the
this mission is actually starting after the destruction of the temple. That's when it's starting.
I can imagine a Christian church. I mean, like trying to say something like, well, Christianity was spread very far, because wasn't a very big religion at the time the Jewish temple was destroyed, right? So they can come and say, but it wasn't really spreading that much until afterwards, right? After the Jewish temple was destroyed, after the Roman Empire kind of started to catch on with it, and that's when the Christianity was spread and by the emperors. And I'm trying to think, like, if I'm a Christian, well, what am I going to try to think of,
Well, they still went to the Gentiles is the issue. Is like that's when the ministry started with Paul, etc. So that's the issue. And then the second obvious problem is just that the version of Christianity that became popular among the Gentiles was this pagan, eating your God, and he's dying for your sins, and the Trinity and stuff. And so there's a theological critique there that we've made many times, which shows that it cannot fit Jesus' words.
But bottom line, this, but I get what you're saying, though. So Christ is talking about inviting other people out other than the Jews to the message. And obviously Paul, and look, regardless of putting Paul in terms of like his truth or falsehood, of course we don't believe he was true, putting that to the side, Paul and his version of Christianity, even if you want to say that's the true Christianity, okay, Paul's version of Christianity was inviting Gentiles. He was inviting Gentiles. They were inviting Gentiles to the faith. This story that Jesus is talking about people are talking about after the temple is destroyed, years later, inviting people at this point. And obviously, what do you call it? That had already happened. That had already started happening before the Jewish temple was destroyed. Yeah. So with Paul and stuff. Yeah.
The first thing we can say is just that, like, the version of Christianity that spread doesn't count. It's this pagan version. Secondly, we also know from other discussions that don't need to be repeated here, but like we know it, is that Jesus didn't actually tell his disciples to go to the Gentiles. We know he came specifically for the Israelites, we know like the arguments
that statement of Christ, I have come not except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's something that actually was kind of in my mind. I'm a bit confused by it now. Is that would you say that's a contradiction, or what's the deal with that?
No, because so basically this parable actually affirms that. So we have many places in the gospel, especially Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus is clarifying that he, don't go to the Gentiles, just go to the Israelites, because I've only come for the lost sheep of Israel.
Right.
So after that, now in Matthew 22, Jesus foretelling a mission to the Gentiles. So does that mean Jesus saying, I've also come for the Gentiles? No. Why? Because foretelling that at a future point in time, there's going to be a mission to the Gentiles doesn't mean you yourself have come for the Gentiles, just like all the Old Testament prophets who foretell a mission to the Gentiles doesn't mean they came for the Gentiles. As an example, if you read the book of Isaiah, it starts Isaiah chapter 2. It starts with a vision.
Wait. Okay. So basically, Christ saying that that the Gentiles will be brought into the fold of God does not mean that he's going to do it.
Right.
He's talking about it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And from the text that you just read to us, it's after the Jewish temple is destroyed. And we all know Christianity began. The Christianity that Christians believe in, which came from Paul, obviously that predates the temple's destruction.
Yeah. And if we actually pull up the parable, let me show you something so he said, God sends servants, right? The king sends servants, and then these are the servants who come to, invite them. So Jesus and his disciples are actually the servants. They count as some of the servants who came before the Israelite destruction of the temple. So they're already identified as the people who came to the Israelites.
Right.
So they're not the servants that come after.
They were inviting other fellow Israelites to the message, right? Yeah. But it wasn't until the time of I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So exactly. So Jesus is one of the people in like verses 4 to 6. So those servants. Now, a possible objection here is they might say that, but it says the rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. So this could imply that all the servants have died. So Jesus died, which contradicts Islam. What's the response to that? It's actually pretty easy. Not all the prophets were killed. That's the point. So in this parable, the point is God sent prophet after prophet, and they rejected them. Right? That doesn't mean they killed all the prophets. They didn't kill all the prophets. Even the Quran confirms a party they killed and another party they rejected. So
right.
yeah, so it's a parable, right? If you take it literally like that, you'd have to think that we have reports of like Isaiah being killed, and we know some other prophets were killed, like John the Baptist, but we know not all of them were killed. That would be ridiculous.
Right. So okay. So now let's just. I think. This seemed a bit complicated at first. Look, the thing with parables and stuff, it makes it a bit harder. But honestly, with this, it's starting to make a lot of sense. So at first, there's this banquet, and this banquet, parabolically, is the kingdom of God. It's Jannah. And now Christ, and I guess the servants, i.e. the prophets, and I guess the disciples of Christ, their responsibility.
You can say the callers to God, the dua.
Yeah, fine. The callers to God are calling people to God, right? Calling people to God, and then at some point, and Jesus acknowledges there's hypocrites amongst them, and this, that, the other, and then at some point,
the hypocrites come at the end, but
okay, fine. So rephrase. So there's a banquet, the kingdom of God. The callers to God are calling people to God, but then Jesus speaks of the destruction of the temple, and then afterwards, people from other, how do I say this? People other, I'm not trying
all
to
of them are invited. Everyone's invited.
Yeah, exactly. So a certain group was invited to the banquet, but now everyone is now invited to the banquet. Let me repeat that. Sorry, everyone is going to be invited to the banquet.
Yeah. So you see that special sort of special relationship that Israel had. That the prophets come to them; they're the ones. Now that's gone. Why?
That's right. Because they broke God's covenant.
Yeah,
they broke God's covenant.
As a punishment. Yeah. Now the temple's destroyed, and now everyone gets it because the Israelites didn't appreciate.
By the way, I've been advised. Let's use the word unalive, not KILL.
Okay.
You know I've been advised. Yeah. Good point, Sister Nadine. Good point.
Now, Now note again that this is confirming the threat of John the Baptist, which was, "Don't say to yourself that we have Abraham as our father, because I tell you, God can raise up children for Abraham from these stones."
Right.
So, and then in the same place, John the Baptist says you're going to, everyone who doesn't repent is going to be punished. So John the Baptist was foretelling the same thing, punishment. And he actually threatened them. They're going to be replaced by children from Abraham. At least that's the implication, right? That don't think you're children of Abraham. You're saved. God can raise up other children from Abraham, even from these rocks. So now Jesus confirming that threat. So it seems that the replacement is going to be the Israelites replaced with other children from Abraham, and then these children from Abraham are going to go to the Gentiles.
Okay. So sum up: banquet, kingdom of God. The callers to God are calling people to God, and then calling the Jewish people to God to the banquet, to the kingdom of God, and then eventually Christ. But then Christ says, after the destruction of the temple, everyone is going to be invited. Everyone, i.e., Gentiles, and this is confirmed by John the Baptist, where he says that basically because the Jewish people are breaking their covenant, God can replace you. God can bring about more. Wait, am I getting it right?
Yeah. He can bring about other children from Abraham.
As a punishment, because you've broken God's covenant, you've unalived God's prophets, you've done all this, that, the other. God, basically, what Jesus is saying will happen, John the Baptist is affirming also as well that this can. John the Baptist is saying this can happen, and Jesus is saying it will
confirming happen. It will, Jesus confirming John the Baptist's message. John the Baptist threatened them. Jesus said, "You know what?
That was before this, right?"
Yeah.
So
that's in the beginning of the gospel.
Exact. So was that Matthew 4? Was it?
That was Matthew 3, and this is Matthew 22.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so in Matthew 3, John the Baptist is talking about, hey, listen, y'all. I mean, let's use Gen Z terms. Basically, you've been tripping out, unaliving God's prophets, and now God, be careful. God Almighty can replace you guys. He can bring about more He can bring about more Was it children of Abraham? Was that the phrase he used? He can bring about more children of Abraham. And again, this is not talking about. I just thought of this though. What if they were to say children of Abraham could just be other Jews? I'm just thinking of that. I'm just trying to say because Jews are children of Abraham, right? Like, why would it be the Arabs? Because Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was an Arab, obviously. Well, what if it's what if other children of God could mean just other Jewish people, or is he speaking to the Jewish people as a whole? Because obviously you can't speak to the Jewish people as a whole and say bring about other Jewish people unless he's speaking to a contingent of the Jewish people. So could you clarify that?
Yeah. So when he says they're going to be that you can be replaced by other children from Abraham, that doesn't necessarily mean Ishmaelites. It could mean Edomites. It's like Deuteronomy.
Right.
Yeah, it's like Deuteronomy 18 when it says a prophet is going to come from your brothers, meaning the Israelites' brothers. And then we know that the Edomites are brothers, the Ishmaelites are brothers, but at least it like restricts it to the Abrahamic nations. But then it'll also become clear from another text that this does seem to be not the Israelites, but another nation. And we'll look at that text, inshallah.
What up, by the way, somebody asked in the comments here on TikTok, you liar, where does it say after the kingdom, after the temple is destroyed? Where does it say that?
Yeah, so it's again in verse, so after all the rejection of the prophets, verse 7, the king was enraged, he sent his army, destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then verse 8 comes after that. Then he said to his servants, the wedding banquet is ready. So after that, he said to servants.
So when it says burn their city, is this something that Christian scholarship themselves, do they recognize this to refer to the temple?
Yeah. So for example, here is the International Critical Commentary by Davies and Allison. This is, I say it's at least one of the go-to standards for a commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, like an academic commentary, and they say this, they mention this, the Oxford Bible Commentary, mentioning specifically that it's the verse 7 alludes to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE.
I saw that right away when you brought it up. Alludes to the destruction of Jerusalem in 73. Okay. Yeah. And this is a commentary on Matthew what?
It's Matthew. The Oxford Bible Commentary on the Gospels.
No, I know, but that was a comment that was a commentary
on Matthew 22. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now, I'm not going to read out Davies and Allison here, but because basically the point is you can pause it if you want, but what I'm just saying, the parable means is what scholars say the parable means.
This isn't basically this isn't some contrived Muslim understanding to try to we're not trying to fit our feet into a glass slipper here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and of course now you'll get them trying to argue that the final servants is like the universal mission of the church, like how Christians say. But again, we've already established that that doesn't fit Jesus' words. And we've also mentioned the other problems with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, of course, academics don't believe in prophecy.
No, yeah, of course not, yeah. All right. Okay, this is
another example is I think this is from the New Collegeville Bible Commentary, and it says, the mistreatment and killing of the king's servants and the king's enraged response are allegorical allusions to the killing of John the Baptist and the prophets and the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Right. So I'm not making none of this up. And it's pretty obvious as well because Jesus foretells the destruction of the temple many times. So he's already set up his audience to take it that way. You know what I mean?
So let me ask you this. So now this all makes sense. You're pulling these understandings of these how do I say this? Basically all these parabolic statements by Christ. I'm seeing that all put together with the understandings that it's based upon Christian scholarship, all makes sense. And it fits Islam very well. My question is, though, because I have a feeling someone's thinking in the back of their heads, well, how did no one notice this for such a long time? Or why is it what has been the Christian understanding of this passage? Because obviously these Christian commentators.
So the Christian understanding is the same. Is just that it's the universal mission of the church, which you mentioned that Christians would be thinking it's the church going, but again, as we mentioned, it's the same problem. The issue is, first of all, we already know historically Jesus did not tell his disciples to go to the Gentiles, and then this was a later idea that they made up.
Right.
We also know the mission to the Gentiles was fake; it was pagan, and we also know that even if we hypothetically grant that mission that Paul, etc., started, it doesn't actually fit what Jesus has said. In terms of why has this not been noticed before, it's actually quoted in Sahih al-Bukhari right here. So this is, here is Bukhari 7281. Some angels came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he was sleeping. Some of them said he's sleeping, others said his eyes are sleeping, etc. Let me just switch to the point. So Then they said his parable is that of a man who has built a house and then offered therein a banquet and sent an inviter to invite the people. So whoever accepted the invitation of the inviter entered the house and ate of the banquet, and whoever did not accept the invitation of the inviter did not enter the house, nor did he eat of the banquet. Then the angel said, interpret this example to him so that he may understand it. Some of them said he is sleeping, others said his heart, etc., etc. So now this is the interpretation. The house stands for paradise. The call maker is Muhammad, and whoever obeys Muhammad obeys Allah, and whoever disobeys Muhammad disobeys Allah. Muhammad separated the people. So the same one, it's just in a different form. And Luke actually has it in a different form as well. And Davies now,
that's insane, bro. SubhanAllah, bro. I did not see that coming, bro. That's almost. Hold on. I have to hold on. Give me a minute. Hold on, wait. They said his example is that of a man who has built a house and then offered therein a banquet and sent an inviter to invite the people. So whoever accepted the invitation of the inviter entered the house and ate at the banquet. Bro, it's same word. And whoever did not accept the invitation of the inviter did not enter the house, nor did he eat of the banquet. Again, for those watching on TikTok, I'm quoting Bukhari here. This is like directly like, subhanAllah, like, in line with
different form of the parable.
This is directly in line with Matthew 22, was it? Some of them said he is sleeping. Others said his eyes are sleeping, but his heart is awake. And then they said the houses stand for paradise, right? And the call maker is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And whoever obeys Muhammad obeys Allah, and whoever disobeys Muhammad disobeys Allah. Muhammad separated the people, i.e., through his message, and good is distinguished from the bad. SubhanAllah, dude, that's almost like too good to be true.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, but that's almost like, here's the thing, because like, look, when you were describing all those things about from Matthew 22, I'm like, okay, it makes sense. It's like it's fitting together. It makes sense. But then I'm like, okay, what does Christian scholarship have to say about it? Like, are all these parabolic understandings, is this just Muslims understanding it this way? No, the Christian scholarship agree. Okay, cool. But then on top of that, we even have the angels coming to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and talking about this very passage or this very same notion, right? Maybe not necessarily quoting this passage verbatim, but it's the same idea. It's the exact same story. It's the exact same parable and everything.
And Jesus could have given the parable in different forms, repeated it. There's a different form of it in the Gospel of Luke. And Davies and Allison say that perhaps Jesus mined one folktale for two parables. So similarly, the angels could be giving a different version, or Jesus could have given this version, and he could have given many, many versions, and we have one recorded in Matthew, one recorded in Luke, and maybe others that no one recorded.
I'm still in shock, man. Sorry, I'm still like in like that's almost, bro. That is literally almost too good to be true. Like, oh my god. But here's the funny thing, man. Here's the funny thing. The funny thing is, I can imagine a Christian taking that passage, or sorry, excuse me, not that passage, that hadith, and saying something on the lines of, look at this. We have a hadith here which says things very similar, very in line with the Bible. Oh, look, they clearly copied from the Bible. And I'm like, subhanallah. One, as Muslims, we believe there is some truth in the Bible, and the Quran, and also the Prophet Muhammad can refer to those things. That's fine. We don't have an issue with that. That's good, actually. That's a proof of Islam, actually. But then the very fact that this is a prophecy found in the New Testament. And that, guys, keep in mind, how would the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ have known about this? How would the Prophet, peace be upon him, unless Allah Azza wa Jalla revealed this to him through the angels, how would he have known about this? Mind you, because someone might say, oh, well, you know what? He obviously just read it from some Christians. And this, well, what do you call it? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wasn't known to have been taught by Christians or Jews or anyone. He didn't know Greek. He didn't know Hebrew, didn't know any of these things. But then on top of that, why on earth would somebody teach this to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ if this is a clear prophecy of him, right? This is a clear prophecy of him. The clear understanding that this hadith talks about, the hadith, this is not just some the Prophet, peace be upon him, isn't just vaguely quoting something. There's a very clear exegetical understanding of this parable, right? In fact, if you look at the hadith, actually, we don't have to bring it up, but that hadith, the angels in that hadith were actually explaining it, right? The banquet means paradise. The caller is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, this isn't just somebody quoting vaguely, just quoting. He heard this New Testament passage that talks about a banquet.
And look, the Bukhari is interpreting it the same way. Modern scholars are interpreting it the same way, and the church has done it the same way as well. So, the meaning of the parable is pretty obvious, actually.
No, but think of it this way, because someone might come and say, well, no, the prophet probably just heard this from some Christians, and he heard about some parable about a banquet, and one could argue, oh yeah, he just heard about Christians vaguely believing in this parable about a banquet and God calling certain people, and then this, that, the other. But then here's the question: how is it that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was able to? And by the way, again, this is not just understanding of Muslims, Christian scholarship, as was demonstrated. These parabolic understandings are not just pulling out of thin air. The Christian scholarship themselves agree with these parabolic understandings, that the callers are people who are inviting people to God, the prophets, for example. That the banquet is paradise. Basically, in order to claim that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew this on his own, you would not only have to say that he was knowledgeable in Greek and in the New Testament, but he was also a biblical exegete. SubhanAllah.
And he got it right, and he just happened to
did it
better than Paul did.
And the exegesis he came up with just happened to perfectly align with Christian scholarship.
Yeah, and
he was
it as well.
So exactly. So he perfectly quoted and perfectly exegeted a Greek New Testament prophecy and fulfilled it perfectly.
Now, let's.
Because keep in mind, mind you, if he had if he had, how do I say this, misinterpreted it or done a false exegesis of this prophecy, they could have used this against him. They could have said, look, see, for example, when this verse talks about a banquet, it's not talking about God, the kingdom of God. It's talking about whatever. They can come up with their own parabolic understandings of this passage and say, look, your prophet, he falsely exegeted this passage to make himself fit. But no, he exegeted it almost identically to the way how these Christian missionaries interpreted it. Sorry, not missionaries, but how these Christian scholars did. These Christian scholars interpreted it and exegeted it in this way, and the prophet not only was aware of that and fit it perfectly, but also was not only aware of that, but also fulfilled it perfectly. SubhanAllah. Like it's just, this could easily have been a proof against Islam. SubhanAllah. Wallahi, it's amazing.
There's one question I see in the chat that it's off topic, but I want to address it. It's off topic, but it'll take me quick to address it. He's basically asking about Deuteronomy 18. He's asking, could you tell us if Joshua was a prophet when Deuteronomy 18 was given? No, because if you read Deuteronomy 34:9, it says the Spirit of God was on Joshua because Moses had laid his hands on him, which is a reference back to the book of Numbers, I believe, chapter 27. It's somewhere around there where Moses anoints Joshua and lays his hands on him, which is before Deuteronomy 18. So when Deuteronomy 18 is mentioned, that's after Joshua was a prophet, so it can't be a reference to him. Anyway, right. Let's go back to the slides because there's one objection I want to answer, and then pretty much I think we can move on to the next thing.
Okay.
The next, okay.
By the way, guys, just really quickly, if you guys are enjoying this, if you guys are benefiting from this, subhanAllah, guys, everyone drop a like on the live. Come on, guys. What are you guys waiting for? Let's just smash that like button, guys. Come on. For Gen Z Dawah, alhamdulillah, right? For Brother Ibrahim here, absolute legend, doing an amazing job, alhamdulillah. I'm learning so much, brothers and sisters. If you guys are learning, if you guys are enjoying this, if you guys think my beard is better than his, drop a like on this live, alhamdulillah. And also, if you're watching this on TikTok, guys, come on, just tap the screen, like the live, share the live, all that good stuff. All right, let's go on.
Right. So the objection would be that the wedding banquet is prepared for the king's son. So they're going to say Jesus is the son. This is actually wrong because Jesus is already clearly one of the servants who sent. So to say that Jesus is also one of the servants who sent and also the son would be giving him a double fulfillment. I think the son doesn't have any significance. Not everything in a parable needs to be interpreted. Just like, for example, Daniel chapter 7 has some descriptions of like these empires that are going to come, but in the interpretation, the angel doesn't tell Daniel what everything means. Some of the descriptions aren't explained. So similarly, not everything in a parable needs to be interpreted, but for sure, Jesus already one of the servants, so he's not the son. And even if he was the son, it wouldn't matter, because Jesus would be the son in the royal sense, because we know in the Israelite understanding, the Messiah is the son of God because he's a king. So that's what makes him different from that's what makes Jesus like David in that sense, that David is the son of God, not only in the sense where everyone's a child of God in the biblical sense, but also he's a king, and the king has a different version of being a son of God as well. And so why is it a wedding banquet for the son? Because you have this idea of a messianic banquet that's going to happen in heaven, where the Messiah is going to be the head. So even if he was the son, it's not an issue. But yeah, with that, so let's see that the same type of prophecy is actually found again throughout. So one of the things we see,
okay, interesting.
Yeah. So one of the things we see is that they're going to be punished, right? That's going to accompany their replacement. So the punishment is also, for example, in Luke 13, then Jesus, he told this parable: a man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the gardener, "See here, for 3 years I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and still I find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" He replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year until I dig round it and put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good, but if not, you can cut it down." So the fig tree here, it would make sense that it is Israel. Israel is often understood to be a fig tree. We'll actually see this in Mark chapter 11 as well, Israel being represented as a fig tree. And the idea is that Israel is not bearing fruit, so they've been given some time to repent, but if they don't, they're going to be cut down. Okay. And
by the way, any concerns about this comment?
Well, honestly, from what I've seen, Christians don't have really stopped responding to our arguments on this topic, and the most common arguments I just hear is, "Not your prophet," or "He is foretold," where Jesus foretells the false prophets. That's where he is, or "You quoting a corrupted Bible? You say the Bible's corrupted and quoting it?" I mean, I don't like, and this is an example of that.
That's what happens when a Canadian tries to do a Southern accent. That's absolute trash. All right. Anyway, I'll tell you what. CM Yeza, I'll tell you what. You can come up on the stream shortly. We're gonna be. I mean, I don't know how much longer we have, but at some point we're gonna be bringing people up on the stage. Obviously, non-Muslims are preferred. They want to come up on stage, challenge what's being said, ask questions about Islam. Don't worry, man. You'll get your time. But unfortunately, most of you trolls tend to just like vanish into thin air as soon as I put the link out for you guys to join. I don't know if it's a coincidence. I don't know what the deal is, man. But regardless, anyway, let's just forget that for now. Let's just get back to
it. Mark 11, same thing, where Jesus foretells the punishment on Israel. So the next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. So Benny suggests that in the background here is this idea that the fig tree is actually Israel, and this is a prophetic sign act. So sometimes in the Hebrew Bible, a prophet gives a prophecy by doing sort of like a play. So you get this in Jeremiah, for example. So this can be a prophetic sign act. And I think in Matthew, it's even clearer that this is a sign act. The point being that the fig tree is Israel, and Jesus saying that it doesn't bear fruit, so it's going to be, cut down. May no one ever eat fruit from you again. Now, Matthew 21. And here we'll see a reason why it seems that the children of Abraham that are replacing them are not Israelites, but this is another nation from Abraham. Matthew 21, another parable, and I'm sure you've heard this one before. Listen to another parable. There was a certain landowner who planted a vineyard and built a wall around it. He dug a winepress in it and built a tower. Then he rented it to vine dressers and went into a distant country. When the season of the fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the vine dressers to receive his fruit. Again, servants going to collect the fruit. The vine dressers took his servants and beat one, killed another, and stoned another. Again, he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did likewise to them. Last of all, he sent his son to them, saying, they will respect my son. But when the vine dressers saw the son, they said to themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. So they caught him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to these vine dressers? They said, he will surely destroy those wicked men and rent his vineyard to other vine dressers who will give him the fruits in their seasons. He said to them, have you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to another nation bearing its fruits. Whoever falls on the stone will be broken to pieces, but on whomever it falls, it will crush him.
So you mind if I ask really quickly, just clarification? So parabolically, what does the vineyard represent?
So the vineyard, I think,
or vineyards plural.
Yeah, I would say the vineyard represents sort of like the covenant that Israel is supposed to keep.
Okay.
And so they're supposed to bear fruits because they're supposed to keep the covenant, the law. Basically, they're supposed to be righteous. They're supposed to, I guess you could say, fertilize it and make sure the fruits, the fruits of Iman grow.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're not doing a good job. The servants come, they keep coming to Israel to get the fruits of Iman, but Israel rejects them, kills them, etc. And then he sends his son, meaning the Messiah. Again, why is he called son? As we mentioned before, Jesus is different from the other prophets because he's also a king, because he's the Messiah, so he's a king. And in Israelite language, there are different ways son of God is used, and one of the ways is it refers to the king. So, for example, David is a king, like in Psalm 2, the king, and he's the son of God in the sense that he's the king. He's not like a literal divine son, but he's the king, and the king in the ancient Near East could often be understood to be called the son. Now, I'll get to the other objection after I explain this. The other objection will be that Jesus killed. I'll get to that. But notice, again, it's the same thing as Matthew 22. The servants come. They're dead. So what's going to happen? He asks them, what will the owner of the vineyard do? They say, he will surely destroy those wicked men, or bring these, he will bring these wicked tenants to a wretched end, which is, again, so first of all, they're going to be punished, right? He's going to destroy them, and he will rent his vineyard to other vine dressers who will actually bear the fruits. So just like Matthew 22, first the punishment, then the replacement by others. So now the covenant is given to others. And how did the Ishmaelite Muslims replace the Israelites? Well, the Quran was given to them instead of the Torah, and this became the new law, the new covenant. The Arabic language got the prominence that Hebrew had. The Qibla changed from Jerusalem to Mecca, etc.
Right.
And also then note Jesus' actual comment. He says, I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to another nation bearing its fruits. And the word nation is in the singular. So Christians will often interpret this as Jesus saying the Gentiles are going to replace the Jews. But if it was about the Gentiles, it would have said nations. But it's a nation, a singular nation.
Right.
Okay. And also, this nation is replacing the Israelites. So obviously, the Israelite nation is not going to be replaced by the Israelite nation. The point is, they're going to be replaced by a different nation, right?
If I can, so I'm looking at verse 35 here. So starting with that, the vine dressers took his servants and beat one. So what I'm a bit confused here is I was thinking, so vine dressers are the servants of God. No, but then I was saying, or at least that's what I thought. But then it's saying the vine dressers took servants and took his servants.
Yeah, so the vineyard is like,
who are the vine dressers and who are the servants?
Yeah. So the vineyard you can think about as like the covenant and whatnot. The vine dressers, or the Israelites, who were supposed to plow it and basically grow the plants and this and that. So they're the workers on the field, and then the servants are sent to collect the fruit. So those are the prophets. So the prophets come to the vine dresser. Yeah. Get it? Okay. So just like Matthew 22, what's going to happen? They're going to be brought to a wretched end, punished, which we know happened from 70 all the way to 135. And even after that, they were exiled. basically, even you could say just a bit before, basically from 70, 80, that's when the punishment really starts. Okay, that's when the temple is broken, and then 135 AD they're exiled. So you had this like Bar Kokhba revolt where a false messiah came up, and he tried to defeat the Romans, but then the Romans came back, killed him, and like kicked all the Israelites out of Jerusalem. And then Jerusalem became a pagan city for a few centuries. Anyway, point is,
okay. So bottom line, So vineyard is the covenant. Vine dressers are the Israelites. At least at first they are. And the servants are the prophets who go and collect these vine dressers, basically bring
like the fruit.
Yeah, the fruit, yeah. Because you'll know them by their fruits. Isn't that something in the New Testament? You'll know them by their fruits, right? So the vineyard, covenant, vine dressers, Israelites, servants, prophets. Oh, and then it says servants. The vine dressers took his servants and beat. So
they killed the prophets and rejected them.
Oh, I see. Beat one, unalived another, stoned another. Basically, they abused and unalived God's prophets, and he sent other servants. So they kept unaliving God's prophets. He kept sending other prophets. He sent other servants. Remember, servants is prophets here. More than the first, and they did likewise to them. So they unalived God's prophets. God kept sending prophets. They kept doing the same to them. And then it says, last of all, he sent his son to them, saying, they will reject my son. Now, who is the son?
The son would be the Messiah, because we know Jesus is the final prophet before Muhammad. So he's now the final one. This is their last chance. They have to accept him.
But why can't they interpret this as, it says last of all. Why can't they say, it says last of all? That means that's it. He's not going to send anyone else after this. Why can't they interpret it that way?
Because it's the last servant to the Israelites. This is the last chance for Israel. But after that, the fact that the vine, this is the last chance for these specific vine dressers, these specific versions. He's the last one to them. But after that, they're going to be replaced. Now, when they're going to be replaced and you have new workers, is the guy not going to try and collect rent?
It says,
or he's just going to let him go?
Okay. So there's a vineyard. This vineyard is currently being tended to by vine. By the way, what is vine? Okay, this is a dumb question. What does vine dresser mean? Like literally, vine dresser is like, because the servants are the ones the vine dresser is the one who own the vineyard, right?
Yeah, they're like the tenants, you could say.
Okay, fine, the tenants, because the servants are the ones who collect the fruit. Okay, so regardless, so kind of like how so the Israelites have this vineyard, the covenant, and the servants of God collect the fruits. But they abuse the servants of God. They unalive the servants of God. And so now Jesus, last of all, he sent his son saying, they will respect my son. Basically, this is the last servant he sent to these vine dressers.
Yeah.
It's the same vineyard, but this is the last one for these vine dressers. And then verse 38 says, but when the vine dressers saw the son, they said to themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us unalive him and seize his inheritance. So they caught him and threw him out of the vineyard and unalived him. And I think you're going to address this later. Yeah. But basically, this is saying that God Almighty sent the last servant, Jesus, the son in this case, he's called the son. He is the last servant, the last prophet to be sent to these vine dressers of the vineyard, to these people of this covenant. But now the question then becomes, it says here, so they caught him, threw him out of the vineyard, and
so the question becomes, what will the owner of the vineyard do at this point?
Yeah.
And the response is he's going to destroy them and give it to give it to others. And then Jesus clarifies the others are a nation. So let me give you the parable in like a modern example. So I rent a house to Rumsey, okay? And I'm supposed to collect rent from him at the end of the month. So I send, someone of mine to go collect rent from Rumsey at the end of the month, and he unalives him. Instead of paying the rent, he unalives him. And then I keep doing that.
No rent out of me.
And then at the end, I send like my best friend. I'm like, this one, he's gonna pay rent. Okay, this is the last chance. He's gonna pay rent. And then he sends him to Rumsey, and Rumsey, he does the usual. He's like, get out of here, and unalives him. So at this point, I've had enough. I'm like, this guy ain't paying me rent. I'm going to unalive him, and then I'm going to get another tenant, and hopefully this tenant will pay me the rent. So I'm going to get Fawad in, and Fawad's going to be the new host, and we're going to kick out Rumsey, and hopefully he's going to pay me rent. In fact, Jesus says they are going to pay him rent. They're going to bear its fruits. Okay. So now the fact that it says a nation in the singular shows that this is not the Gentiles in general, but it's a specific nation. Such
What
as
does it say nation exactly? I'm trying to
verse 43.
43. Therefore,
The word in Greek is ethnos.
Okay.
Now, when it's used for Gentiles, the plural is used. Now, R.T. Franchi goes on because some people will say technically the word can mean could be used just for a small group of people, but really we have to ask why this specific word, and because this specific word does have a connotation of a nation. So that's like the more apparent meaning of the word. So R.T. France goes in and he sort of discusses this in detail. So he says to translate it as people, it doesn't fully capture the wording ethnos, who are hardly a people. And even though it could be used for a small group of people, the point is the word itself seems to imply an actual nation, something more than that. So the best explanation for why Matthew used this specific word is that he was talking about a nation. Okay? That fits the wording better. But anyway, so then if they're being replaced by now one nation, we might ask, what nation is this? Which ethnicity? And again, the implication seems to be it's another Abrahamic nation, because Jesus is not speaking about this out of the blue. This is the first time he's talked about it. No, he's confirming what John the Baptist says. And what did he say? He threatened them that God can replace you with other children from Abraham. He can raise up children from Abraham from these rocks. So if you put two and two together, it's the implication seems to be, the indication, I would say, seems to be that they're going to be replaced by a different Abrahamic nation.
But now, what about this though? So here's this. So verse 43. If you go back to that page where I saw verse 43, it explicitly says, "Whoa, wait, hold up, he lost this man." It says there, because it's crystal clear. It says, "Therefore, I tell you, the kingdom of God," because it's almost like here, it's like the parable is stopped, and now he's just speaking very clearly.
Yeah,
it says,
this is
therefore,
explicit.
it's just explicit, straight up, straight.
Yeah.
It's just cut to the chase. He says, "Therefore, I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you, the Jews, taken from you, and given to a nation bearing its fruits." Yeah. My question is, because obviously, look, obviously Christians have been reading the Gospel of Matthew for a minute, a little more than a minute now, right? So, what a Christian reads? Oh, therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a nation bearing its fruits. What nation do they have in mind? What is this nation in their minds? Because I mean, obviously the Jewish people. Obviously, it's crystal clear here. Taken from you. He's talking to the Jews. Okay, taken to the Jews and given to a nation bearing its fruits. Well, what is this nation? Who is this nation? Who do they think it is?
Yeah, they will essentially say two very similar things. Either they're going to say it's the Gentiles, but again, that doesn't perfectly fit the wording because it's in the singular. Right. Other times when Gentiles are being spoken of, the plural is used. So you would actually have to explain why it's in the plural.
Side note: can Gentiles be considered a nation?
Yeah, you would understand. Yeah. So the second thing they're going to say is that it's the Christian nation. All the Christians are one nation. You know, like how we speak about the Ummah. You know, but again.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, when Jesus speaks about Gentiles, he uses the plural. So why would he use the singular here? Again, is what they have to explain. And where did Jesus ever use the word nation to speak about the Christian nation in that sense? You know.
Okay. But now let me ask you this: is there further evidence? Because look, okay, you could say, well, Christ always used the word nation.
Yeah, because again, we know that Matthew 21 is not isolated. We've seen that this is a theme that's running throughout the Gospel of Matthew. And so we really collect these texts together because they're all foretelling the same thing. Notice this parable is basically very, very similar to Matthew 22. And so one of the things, if you remember from Matthew 22, which was the issue, was that clearly the destruction of the temple is first and then, you know, the sending of the other prophets. And we have that in just a different form in this parable because it says, you know, what will the owner of the vineyard do? They said he will, number one, destroy those wicked men, and number two, rent it to others. So again, what is the destruction that came upon them? We know when that was. That's happened from 70 AD onwards. That's when the punishment came.
But let me
And
ask you
after
this.
that, yeah.
So now, is there further evidence to indicate that this nation? So it says God will get. So therefore, I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you, the Jews, and given to a nation bearing its fruits. Is there further evidence to indicate who this nation is?
Yeah, so what Jesus has told us here is that it's going to be a nation and it's going to bear its fruit. So they're not going to be like the Jews. They're going to be obedient, right?
Okay.
And the indication then, from the fact that this is not the first time this is brought up, this is a theme throughout Jesus' preaching. And John the Baptist threatened them with children from Abraham. So the indication would seem to be it's an Abrahamic nation. And note then that this would then, it would make sense that the servants in Matthew 22 who go out this time to the Gentiles are specifically the Ishmaelite nation who goes out to the Gentiles, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, so that would make sense. Again, you connect all these texts together and you see that clearly this is happening after the destruction of the temple. We know Matthew 22 says that explicitly, but Matthew 21 also implies it when it says that they're going to be the vine dressers are going to be punished. When the sequence is, he will destroy the wicked, then rent his vineyard to others, and rent his vineyard to others, I should say. But again, the implication is first the destruction, first the punishment of the Jews, then the replacement.
So,
and the indication is that this is an Abrahamic nation if we connect it to what John the Baptist said.
So just to be clear, so would you mind quickly? I do apologize. Could you mind quickly summarizing why this nation cannot just be? Because look, a Christian could look at this and say, well, yeah, the Jews, they were a hypocritical nation. They were not obeying God. They were, there were a lot of problems with them. That's why Christ had to come, die for our sins, this, that, the other. And actually, this brings about, well, the issue of him dying, being unalived. But we'll get to that in a moment. Before we go back to him being unalived, first, the fruits. So this nation, given to a nation bearing its fruits. Would you mind? I'm so sorry. Quickly summarizing why it cannot be just the Christian nation in general.
Yeah. So it would be the same arguments that we used in Matthew 22. They would apply here as well for two reasons. Number one, because the parable is foretelling essentially the same thing, but just in a different parable. But secondly, because the parables are connected to each other.
The same thing. It's the same. Yeah, it's the same prophecy.
Yeah. So they explain each other, right? So you can use Matthew 22 to interpret Matthew 21, right? So because they explain each other and because they're the same parable essentially in different forms, the same arguments that apply there apply here as well. And those arguments independently apply here as well. Number one, it's clearly after the punishment of the Israelites, so after 70 AD, whereas the book of Acts, the Gentile mission, and Paul's Gentile mission is before 70 AD. As we know, the book of Acts is before the destruction. Secondly, we know that that Jesus didn't actually tell his followers to go to the Gentiles, that this is a later innovation. There's no need to go into much detail about that in this stream because that's a whole big topic.
It is funny though so the New Testament does speak about Christ saying, I've come only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Yeah. But then he also says that there will be another nation, a non-Israelite nation who will be brought into the fold of God. Yeah, now, it's funny. Look, I can see why Christians want to interpret that for themselves, right? Because obviously they're not Jews. They're all Gentiles, right? So therefore, I can see why they want to interpret it that way. But now having explained and having, in the light of Islamic history, knowing, and also seeing all this as well about, for example, how this came after the destruction of the Jewish temple. Paul and the notion of preaching to the Gentiles came before the destruction of the Jewish temple. Yeah. But Matthew 21, or was it 22? Matthew 22 mentions this happening. Yeah. It talks about this nation coming to the kingdom of God after the destruction of the temple.
Yeah, and Matthew 21 implies it as well, but it's just that Matthew 22 is more explicit. But Matthew 21 implies it too. And then the third point is just that the version of Christianity that spread was, like this pagan version of Christianity, and then eventually the Trinity.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation though. Yeah.
And note that Jesus says that this nation that's going to replace them is going to bear its fruits. Now, a pagan Christianity.
What does that mean though? What does that mean?
Basically, the first workers weren't weren't.
Oh, I see. They're gonna carry on. They're gonna carry the message, carry the flame, carry the message.
Basically, so the covenant, the vineyard is the covenant, etc. Right? So
Tawheed of Allah,
you're supposed to make fruit grow out from it, but they weren't keeping it well. They weren't like, I guess,
that covenant
fertilizing
was,
it,
and that covenant was tawheed, was monotheism.
yeah. So
it
you
was
could think
obedience to God.
The fruits, yeah, the fruits of Iman, obedience, and this and that. So this nation is going to be obedient, unlike the Israelites. Now the Christians that went to the Gentiles were, you could say, worse than the Jews, because they were Trinitarians. And
look, they were not. Look, put it this way: the covenant involved them following the laws of God. Correct? That was an important part of the covenant. Muslims, alhamdulillah, do follow the laws of God. Right? We believe. Right?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, we don't believe in the notion that the law is dead. Christians teach that the law is dead, right, and that the law is not to be applied. The law is not to be followed. So, whereas Muslims, on the other hand, we reject this categorically, that the law of God is not dead. The law of God is well, of course, not only for our guidance, but it has to be followed. It has to be followed. It has to be obeyed. Put it this way: if you put Muslims and Christians, and actually, I did a stream about this a while ago. It's been a minute, but I did. Where I did a stream titled "It's Muslims or Christians who are truly lawless," right? And obviously, we all know, if anyone with half a brain knows, the Muslims are sure as hell not a lawless people. We are not a lawless people. You might hate our laws. The Christians might complain and cry about how much they don't like Sharia. But sure as hell, you cannot say that Muslims are lawless. This talks about a nation that will bear the fruits.
Yeah. So they'll keep the covenant and the laws and this and that. And
Exactly.
So the point is, this nation is contrasted to Israel, because whereas Israel was not righteous, this nation is going to be righteous. Now we know from the Quran that the Muslim Ummah is the greatest Ummah raised up for mankind, the greatest nation raised up for mankind. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's nation is the greatest one. Surah Al Imran mentions, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas." You're the best nation raised up for mankind. Whereas we know the Christian nation that came to the Gentiles, etc., you could say is worse than the Jews, because they were mushrikun. The Christians were.
Well, not only that, but look. That's all. That brings about the Trinity argument. But one thing they can't deny is they don't follow God's laws. Yeah. They don't follow God's laws.
And then the final argument would just be the fact that Jesus has used the word nation here, that better fits the Ishmaelite nation rather than the Christian Gentiles. Okay, so there's this final text, which I'll just go over briefly. Basically, Jesus, he gives a parable of like a landowner who hires out the laborers at different times of the day. So starting with in the morning, and then he finds some other workers a few hours later, and he hires them. Then a few workers later, and he hires them, and so on and so forth. Now at the end of the day, he pays all of them the same money. Okay, so some of the workers who work longer, who were hired before, are angry. Is like, how come you paid all of us the same when we worked longer? And the boss, I guess, says, I want to be generous to everyone. It's my right. I can be generous. Okay, so you get this idea that it's one day. It's one day, and you have the boss going out and hiring different people throughout the day. Okay, and they all get paid the same at the end of the day. Okay. That's the parable, essentially. Now, the Christian tradition, the most common interpretation for this in the Christian tradition, I'll just go here to this article, mentions this, is that the most common interpretation for this is that God is the person hiring. He's like the boss, and he's hiring different people throughout the ages. So starting with the people at the time of Adam, and then the people at the time of Noah, and then the people at the time of Abraham, and then Moses, and this and that. And they say that the final workers hired are themselves, right? The church and whatnot. The same interpretation, or I should say a very similar interpretation, is given in Sahih al-Bukhari for this parable. Bukhari 2268, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, your example and the example of the people of the two scriptures is like the example of a man who employed some laborers and asked them, Who will work for me from morning till midday for one qiraat? The Jews accepted and carried out the work. He then asked, who will work for me from midday up to the Asr prayer for one qiraat? The Christians accepted and fulfilled the work. He then said, who will work for me from the Asr till sunset for 2 qiraats? You Muslims have accepted the offer. The Jews and the Christians got angry and said, why should we work more and get lesser wages? Allah said, have I withheld part of your right? They replied in the negative. He said, it is my blessing. I bestow upon whomever I wish. And again, this is the same parable in Matthew 20. You can see it right here. Landowner who went early in the morning to hire laborers. When he had some of them agreed for a denarius for the day, he sent them to the vineyard. Then he went in the third hour, he got others, etc. And at the end, of course, they all complain and they say, why should they get more than us, or in this case, equal to us? And he says, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius and whatnot? So it's the same parable, or it's a different form of it. And it's a similar interpretation to the majority interpretation in the church. Basically, the different people who are hired at the different ages of the world's existence, you could say. So the first workers are, again, the people at the time of Adam, then the people at the time of Noah, and then Abraham, Moses, etc., etc., etc. Of course, the church then goes and says the final workers are the church, basically, right, themselves. But the issue is that Jesus already foretold that there's actually going to be another nation that's going to come in the future. So obviously, to fit in this parable, the nation would have to be at the end, not the church. You get it?
I think so.
Okay, so Jesus saying that, you have these people who are hired at different times of the day, meaning, yeah. So who are the final people who are hired? That's the question. The church wants to say it's the church itself is the final people that are hired. But because Jesus has already foretold that there are going to be others who are going to come in the future, another nation that's going to come in the future, obviously that has to be the final, at least one of the, and so it can't be the church. But anyway, this is just a nice parable summarizing.
Wait, hold on, wait. I got you all so far, but you lost me where it says, why can't it be the church? Why not again?
Because the church, again, wants to say they're the final workers,
right?
They're the final workers, but we know from the other text we just looked at that there are other workers who are coming after Jesus. So then they have to be the final.
But they could say the church came after Jesus, right? So wait, can they?
Yeah, but you see the church, by the church I mean like Jesus and his followers and the Gentile followers and all that. And again, that doesn't fit the other texts, which we've already mentioned, because the other text can't be about the Christians. Like that has to be another.
It talks about after the destruction of the temple and stuff.
Yeah. So now the parable itself could be interpreted a couple other ways. Like you could say it's the different people coming into the obedience of God at different ages. Like some people when they're born, other people in the Middle Ages, some people accept God when they're old, etc. It doesn't actually matter because these different interpretations would just complement each other. They wouldn't contradict; they'd complement. And again, the most popular interpretation in the church has been that it's talking about the different ages of the world, and that's the interpretation we have in Bukhari as well. Okay. But anyway, also it's interesting, by the way, that the parable ends by saying, let's see. It ends by saying, so the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Now, Jesus uses this a few times. One of the times he uses this is in the Gospel of Luke when he foretells that the Gentiles are going to come into Jannah, whereas the Jews are going to be thrown out. So it could be linked to this prophecy. It's also interesting because in let's see if I got it here. Okay, yeah. So in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet, peace be upon him, says, "We who are the last shall be the first on the day of resurrection."
Okay,
that's it. So it's just a nice parable to just summarize sort of what's going on. At this point, I'm gonna transition into the Old Testament material, but before that, I just want to sum up what we've gotten from the Old Testament. The New Testament, just connecting some of these texts, and then we'll move on to the Old Testament. Essentially, John the Baptist, this is how Matthew begins his gospel in chapter 3. sets the scene, John the Baptist, by threatening them with punishment and threatening them that they're going to be replaced by other children from Abraham, that God can even raise up children from Abraham from these rocks. So there's a threat, you might be replaced by other children from Abraham. Then Jesus confirms this in a number of places, saying that the Gentiles are going to come into the obedience of God, whereas a lot of the Israelites are going to be thrown into hell. And he says that there's going to be another nation that will replace the Israelites. He tells us that there are going to be other servants, callers to God, who are going to be sent after the destruction of the temple to go to the Gentiles and call them to the obedience of God. So that's how the Gentiles are going to come into the obedience of God. You're going to have these other servants who come out and call them, invite them to God's paradise, and they're going to accept. If we connect all the texts together, we know that this is going to be a nation that's going to come.
Okay.
The indication is from John the Baptist that it's an Abrahamic nation. Okay.
Right.
And we know that there will be servants who will call the Gentiles to the obedience. So it would seem that this Abrahamic nation is going to go to the Gentiles and call them to the obedience, just like Israel. Yeah. Just like Israel in Deuteronomy, basically they were supposed to keep the law.
Yeah.
And by keeping the law, that was supposed to inspire the Gentiles, okay, to worship God as well. And they were supposed to go, look, Israel is such a wise and understanding people. That was their role, but they failed. They failed to be a light to the Gentiles.
Right.
Okay? So now they're told you're going to be replaced by another nation. So then this nation now has to be the light to the nations. And how are they going to do that? They're going to go to the Gentiles explicitly and invite them. And so again, if you connect the dots, an Abrahamic nation replacing the Israelites, going to the Gentiles, what does that sound like? That sounds like the Ishmaelite nation of the prophet peace be upon him that came after the destruction of the temple, went to the Gentiles, and they accepted. I mean,
I have two questions though. So one, what was the indication from from John the Baptist? What was it about his testimony that indicated it was the Ishmaelites?
It indicated that it's children from Abraham.
Okay.
Because what he says is,
look, another nation besides the Jews. What other nation that's descended from Abraham has done that?
Yeah.
The Muslims. So, but then my other question is though, is this connected to Deuteronomy 18? Excuse me. Is this connected to Deuteronomy 18:18, where it says, "I'll bring up a prophet from your brethren, the brethren of the Israelites," i.e.
Yeah, it's pretty similar, and just like Moses was what Moses did for the Israelites is what the prophet peace be upon him did for the Ishmaelites. So it would make sense then that if Israel is being replaced by another Abrahamic nation, that they would have their own Moses who would do for them what Moses did for them. Now, another indication, and this is less explicit than John the Baptist, but you could say it's like a hint that the nation is going to be the Ishmaelite nation, is the fact that in Matthew 21, Jesus says they're going to be fruitful, right? They're going to bear the fruits, right?
Yeah.
Now in Genesis 17, God said that Abraham is going to be, in Genesis 17, God said to Abraham that Ishmael is going to be fruitful. So that might be an indication, but definitely we know it's children from Abraham. And so that narrows it down, or I should say,
I think when John the Baptist makes it clear, it's a nation descended from Abraham, right? Now,
that's an indication. I should say.
I can't think of how one could interpret the Christian ummah, quote unquote, as being the nation descended from Abraham.
So they say they're like metaphorical children from.
Abraham. But you have the Muslims. And the Ishmaelites, we have the Ishmaelites who directly fulfill that, and then you have, it's like, which one are you going to pick? A direct fulfillment or a metaphorical one that you feel like you just kind of have to fit in there?
Yeah. So Jesus tells us it's a nation. John the Baptist threatened them with that it's children from Abraham. So you connect the dots; it's pretty clear. Yeah. One final thing that I forgot to address is in Matthew 21, the son dies. So they say that's Jesus.
Yes, right? Yes, I forgot about that. Yes.
Now it's actually interesting. So first of all, it's a parable. So everything in it doesn't actually need to happen literally in the way it's set out, if we have indications that it's not going to be fulfilled literally the way it's said in the parable. And in this parable, we have an indication, because note what Jesus says. He says, have you never read in the scriptures, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? Jesus quoting a psalm. Okay. This is Psalm 118. and he's applying it to himself. Okay. If you go back to Psalm 118, I think it's verse 7, it says, I will not die, I will live. The whole psalm is a prayer to God to save the psalmist. The psalmist is praying to God, save me. People are trying to kill me, save me. Jesus applying.
Well, I'm confused though. I'm confused. So now, okay. So on the one hand, he says here, wait, hold on. Let me actually on my own.
Yeah. So this can represent their intentions. Their intentions to kill Jesus, but at the end, Jesus clarifies, but you're not actually going to be able to kill me.
So it says, so they caught him, they threw him out of the vineyard and unalived him. But then he quotes, is it verse 42 where he's quoting Psalm 118?
Yeah.
Okay. And then in Psalm 118 explicitly says that he doesn't get unalived.
Yeah, it says, I'm not going to die, I'm going to live. So the point is Jesus is applying that psalm to himself.
But then my question is, why is it, why it seems like, look, from a direct reading of the passage, it seems like, look, if Psalm 118 explicitly says he will not die, but then previously he says, then parabolically he says, they caught him, threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. It seems like he's saying, I will die, but I will not die. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
It wouldn't work because Psalm 118 literally says, I will not die. I will live. And then the other thing is, you note that here he's being thrown out of the vineyard, right?
Yeah.
So in the Gospels, you get this idea that like Jesus was thrown out of Jerusalem and crucified there. Okay. But what's interesting is in Luke chapter 13, verse 33, Jesus says, nevertheless, I must press on today and tomorrow and the next day, for surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. So commentators know that when it's talking about him thrown out of Jerusalem, that here the vineyard, just for this verse, becomes Jerusalem because the allusion is to Jesus being thrown out of Jerusalem. The idea in the gospel says Jesus was thrown out of Jerusalem and killed there. But then the issue is Jesus says a true prophet cannot be killed out of Jerusalem. So did Jesus think he's a true prophet?
I have heard that argument before about Jesus. That's in Luke 20,
Luke 13, verse 33.
Okay.
And so what this could actually just be some later addition by some author who's trying to make Jesus, Allah
knows best. But look, I don't even want to assume that. I want to try to be as generous as possible and say that I just assume that's not the case. So parabolic. So okay. How about this? When it quotes Psalm 118, is that considered a parable? Or not. I'm asking if the psalm is a parable.
No,
I'm asking.
Can you parabolically
quote a psalm?
They would have to say something like he's quoting it, and the problem is it seems like he's applying it to himself. Because if he's the cornerstone here, then that fits with the imagery of him being the last servant sent to the Israelites.
I'm just trying to make sense in my mind. Because on the one hand, look, if Psalm 118 says, "I will not die," okay, that's pretty explicit. But it's like I'm seeing two explicit statements opposites to each other. I will die. I will not die.
I mean, there are only two ways around this, right? Now, number one, you could try and harmonize. And so there are two ways to try and harmonize. One way you could try and harmonize it is by giving preference to the parable. The other way you could try and harmonize it is by giving preference to the psalm and to Luke 13, where Jesus says a true prophet cannot die outside Jerusalem.
Right. Okay.
So it just depends on what you.
The other way is to say that this is an interpolation or it's a contradiction, whatever.
And many scholars think it's an interpolation anyway.
Oh, really? Look. Here's the thing. I don't even want to go there. Look, the whole, of course.
But you can go to an interpolation when there's a reason to think that.
Yeah.
And in this case, there is reason to think it's an interpolation. And another reason to think it's an interpolation is because if Jesus had really foretold that he's going to die and be resurrected, that at the end of the Gospel of Luke, the disciple, there's a disciple, he sees the empty tomb and he's like wondering what's happened here. And when they hear about, hear about Jesus, that, he's risen up, they're like, it's just a bunch of fairy tales. Now, if they understood from Jesus' speech that I'm going to die and resurrect, why would they go, this is just a bunch of fairy tales? Why would he come to the empty tomb like, what's happening here?
Okay, you know what? That's a very good point, actually, because on the one hand, you got to keep in mind, I guarantee you some Christians watching this right now or is going to watch this later or whatever, and someone's going to say, hold on, wait, someone's insulting. I have to mute this person. Sorry, bear with me just a moment. But look, I guarantee someone's watching this or is going to watch this later maybe and say, and they're just going to start with the presupposition, here are these Muslims coming with their presuppositions, with their presupposed interpretations, with their look. So and then when you said right now, oh look, for example, this could be an interpolation into the Bible. Oh, haha, I see. The Muslims are, they can't interpret this. They can't basically. They don't have a consistent interpretation, so they have to claim it's a corruption. But then at the same time, this interpretation is not that Jesus is not going to die. This isn't something that, look, if Jesus saying that, assuming he said that again, was such a clear indication that he was going to die, well, then why would the disciples later on be like, wait, what do you mean he died? Like, what? Like, why would they be so surprised that he died? If his whole...
they're surprised at the idea of a resurrection and stuff. So, throughout the Gospels, you get this narrative, Jesus, like, I gotta go die and fulfill the scriptures, then I gotta raise up. If all these predictions were Jesus saying, I'm gonna die, that I'm gonna raise up, if that sort of material is really what Jesus said historically, why it
well then, that would mean the disciples were either stupid or they exactly. or like, because look, put it this way, the understanding from that passage, because look, two things. One, one's a parable. One of the parabolic one says that he says they unalived him. The non-parabolic, the clear one, where he quotes Psalm 118, where it explicitly says, I will not die. You made a very good point. There's two ways you can reconcile that, or a couple ways. You can either A, claim it's a contradiction, and okay, we don't have a problem. If there's a contradiction in the Bible, that's fine for us Muslims. That's a problem for the Christians. Option B, you could say, well, you have to pick one of those to take precedence. You have to pick the clear statement or the parable. Obviously, it makes more sense to pick the clear statement, right? Because, and in fact, if they want to pick the parable, doesn't Allah in the Quran talk about people who pick ambiguous statements over clear statements, right, for their own agenda, right? So you either have to pick one, or option. So three options. Option A, contradiction. Okay, the Bible contradiction in the Bible is not a problem for us. It's a problem for the Christians. Option B, you have to pick one to take precedence, and logically, you would pick the clear, the explicit one, not the parable, to be the to take precedence. Option C, this is an interpolation, a forgery into the Bible. Yeah. Either way,
as again, many scholars say that Jesus never actually predicted that he's going to die, then resurrect, and all this stuff, and they use the Gospel of Luke as evidence for that.
So you either have to acknowledge the Bible's not reliable, or, which it's not, of course. But look, speaking from a Christian perspective, to deal with this, you either have to agree the Bible's corrupted, or you have to pick a parable over a clear statement.
Yeah, and so again, Jesus can just be using their intentions to kill the Messiah and just relaying that to them in this parabolic form because they wanted to kill him. That was their intention. So their intention is like, in terms of sin, their intention to kill him and their plotting to kill him is like them killing him, in that sense. As we know, that deeds are by their intentions. And if you intend to do an evil action, but you don't get the chance to do it not because of your own, like you decided I'm not going to do it, but like because of circumstances you weren't able to do it, well, that's still going to be written down as a sin against you. So similarly, it can just be Jesus knows of their intentions. But anyway, at this point, let's move on now to the Old Testament. One thing we'll see from the Old Testament is, again, this idea of the prophet, peace be upon him, coming after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE.
And by the way, just for people to appreciate this, the previous stuff from the New Testament you were quoting, you were not quoting, you were explaining, I guess you could say. What were you telling me that you presented this, the previous passages, the previous arguments of these particular passages? Have you presented this in a debate before?
I've only presented very briefly Matthew 21, Matthew 22 towards the end of my debates, and they were never really, because that was not the focus of my debate. It was basically Daniel and Isaiah. So you could say they were kind of forgotten in the course of the debate. But again, even then, it would just be one text, whereas here, what I've done is I have shown the string of text throughout the Gospels, and I've connected them and all this stuff. And I haven't done that with Jake, Muslim metaphysician. I didn't do that with in my debates. So I did it in a live stream.
By the way, So I have a question. Look, what do you think? So I don't mind doing the Old Testament right now. We can do that right now. My question is, do you want to a couple options. We could just go straight into it and do it through the whole Old Testament right now. Not the whole Old Testament, but I mean through your whole presentation about the Old Testament right now. If you want, you can do it again next week and save just the Old Testament. Just focus on just the New Testament this week and do the Old Testament next week. We can just start bringing people up now. What do you prefer to do? Because I'm happy.
Sure. We can do it.
Because look, I think look, honestly, I'm loving this. I love the information that's being provided, honestly. But I'm just slightly worried that it might end up being too much for some people. You know what I'm saying? If you think we should do the Old Testament today, that's totally fine. I'm sure everyone would love that. But at the same time, I'm just like, plus, I think doing a part 2 would be amazing as well. What do you think is a good idea?
Yeah, we can definitely do it as a part 2, but it's just because I have to move back, so it might not be next week.
Okay, that's fine.
Or it might be like 2-3 weeks later. I'll see, because before I move back, I'm actually.
No, look, how about this? Look. If you think it's better for us just to do the second part right now.
No, let's just do it in a second part. But I'm just saying it wouldn't be next.
We're about to hit the 2-hour mark. Alhamdulillah. I think that's a good.
It might be 2 or 3 weeks later, because before I move.
Bro, don't worry, man. There's no problem. The Christians aren't going to corrupt the Bible anymore in those 3 weeks. Don't worry. All right.
Yeah.
Or maybe they will actually. I don't know. We'll see.